We're continuing reading the book of Mark, starting with chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, into the region of Gerasenes. I'll not say that in English, but this is right after they had the big storm where Jesus did the miracle of saying, "Be still," and everything turned calm and okay. So they showed up to the other side of the sea. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. So he was demon possessed and he lived in the cemetery or something of that sort. Very sad. Obviously, he was alienated from the society and probably a danger to the society. That's why, most likely. He lived among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, not even with a chain. He lived among the tombs, okay, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Scary. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and cutting himself with stones. That's so sad. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. And shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do you have with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." And that was not him talking, it was the demons. For he had already been saying to him, so Jesus was already talking to this man, saying, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And now the spirit was giving Jesus an attitude, talking back. And he was asking him, "What is your name? What is your name?" So now Jesus was talking to the demons out of this man, not specifically to the man, because the man wasn't there anymore, didn't have any control over what he was saying. So the demons replied to him, so through the man. So and he said to him, to Jesus, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So that means like an entire bunch, like an entire bunch of demons, like a group of soldiers, kind of legion. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Now there was a large herd of pigs feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons begged him, saying, "Send us into the pigs so that we may enter them." Imagine having demon-possessed pigs or demon-possessed animals. Quite something. Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them. And they were drowned in the sea. Imagine this man was possessed by at least 2,000 demons, who ended up entering 2,000 pigs, who then just died. What was the point of that? And what was the point of entering the pigs if now they're dead and you can't use them anymore? I bet there's more to that meaning than the story tells us. I'm really curious about it, but I don't know the answer. However, we know that pigs were not to be eaten in Israel. The law of God, the Old Testament said, "Do not eat pigs because they are unclean." So pretty much any sort of animal that eats disgusting stuff or rotting stuff or corpses or trash or unhealthy toxins like scavengers in the sea, they're not healthy for you, so don't eat them. They're called unclean. And it also said it makes you unclean. So if your body wasn't in a healthy state, then I guess your spirituality was affected by that too. And therefore they had rules about what you eat. Pig was not to be eaten. It was an unclean animal. Unclean could also mean unholy. So the demons entered the pigs, and then all those pigs died. So now all these people didn't have unclean meat to eat anymore, which they weren't even supposed to in the first place. So they were breaking the rules. I wonder if these were pure Jews or not. See what I'm saying? I don't fully know all the details behind this story because it's perplexing, but that poor guy who was possessed of at least 2,000 demons, he was suffering. He was suffering, and Jesus saved him. And Jesus had the power to. And he did. And he still has the power to this day to do bigger things than that. Their herdsmen, those poor people who lost their pigs, they lost their income. Their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the countryside, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And then they came to Jesus and saw the man who had been demon possessed sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had previously had the legion, and they became frightened. Okay, they were like, we as an entire town couldn't save this man or control him, and you, boom, like that. Not only did you save him, but you turned him into like a good, basic, normal man who could be successful and looks mentally healthy and safe. Plus, we lost all our pigs. So funny. Yeah, they were terrified. And they began to beg him to leave their region. So sad. When you make decisions out of fear, not faith. Not a good decision, but still they made decisions out of fear because that was horrifying to them. Wow. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed was begging him that he might accompany him. Oh, that's so sad. He's like, I have no one or nothing here. Everybody hates me in this town and I'm terrified to start from scratch. Just take me with you. I will serve you faithfully for the rest of my life. But Jesus was like, no, you have a mission here. What I couldn't do, you can. I did my part, now you do yours. Okay? And he did not let him. Jesus did not let him accompany him, but he said to him, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you. And how he had mercy on you. So Jesus is powerful. That is terrifying. He can be scary. He can do horrifying, terrifying things. But he is good, and he is kind, and he is loving. And he uses that power for good, even though it scares us. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed by the seashore. And one of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came and upon seeing him fell at his feet, respect, and pleaded with him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live. Sometimes desperation triggers a change of life in someone, a desire to finally return to faith and seek God and find salvation. That some sort of desperation could be the point that leads you to salvation. And he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. A woman who had had a hemorrhage for 12 years, she was bleeding for 12 years, imagine that, and had endured much at the hands of many physicians. They were probably doing experimental procedures on her, and had spent all that she had, so she was broke now, and was not helped at all, but instead had become worse. I just imagine this woman being like really tired, probably slightly disoriented, really skinny and really pale. And she's just like on her last strand of life. Who knows? what was happening in her day-to-day life for her to be able to survive when she got to this point. How hopeless that must have felt. Never married, most likely, never had kids. She probably was grieving that she could never have that. As a woman, your livelihood depended on someone who would marry you, or your father's house keeping you in to serve around. It must have been real hard and painful for her. So after hearing about Jesus, this woman, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. For she had been saying to herself, "If I just touch his garments, I will get well." And immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that power from him had gone out, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And he wasn't like, "Oh no, you touched my garments and stole from me." It was more like, "I want to acknowledge you. I want you to know I care. You matter to me, and I am so grateful to give you this healing." And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. He cared. He looked around, even though nobody else did, because they thought it's a useless question, but he knew. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be cured of your disease." So it sounds like she probably felt a lot like a burden on people. And maybe that's why she was even afraid to just approach him and just ask in the first place. She said, "If only, like, I believe. If only I touch him, I know I'll be okay, because he can." But she probably was afraid herself within her identity that she is worthy of that love and care, because everybody made her feel like she's not at this point. But he acknowledged her and changed that for her. The most powerful person in her life changed how she views herself, so she can be healed not only physically, but in every other way. And he said, "Your faith has made you well." It's not even like, "Oh, I made you well. Oh, look at me. Give me credit." It was more like, "Look at you. You have the strength within you. You can accomplish things. Your belief is powerful, and I have given you power in that faith that will shift things in your life. Believe, and things will shift for you. Your faith is enough. I provide, if only you believe." And you did that. Go in peace. Don't be afraid anymore. You're fine. It's well. You're loved. You're okay. Go in peace and be cured. While he was still speaking, people came from the house of the synagogue official, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why bother the teacher further?" But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, only believe." Yet again, faith. We just saw the example, and now he has to have faith, because Jesus already has proven himself. He can and he will do anything. That's a miracle, just like that. And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Very interesting. Those three, man. What an honor. They came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion and people loudly weeping and wailing. Of course, yeah, they were already grieving, putting up that show, because in many ways it was also a show. Some people got paid to weep at a funeral, even though they don't even know the person. It's like a whole ritual they had to do. So they were like, boom, she died, okay, we're wailing. So it's not funny, but it's like, wow, the commitment to those rituals. Yeah, interesting. And after entering, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child has not died, but is asleep. And they began laughing at him. But putting them all outside, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, so Peter, John, and Jacob, or James, whichever translation you prefer. So the three of them showed up in the room. And taking the child by the hand, he said to her, so the child was dead. But death is just a bridge. Sometimes you can pass it backwards. Sometimes you pass into death, and sometimes you just cross the bridge back home to life like this. So he grabbed this dead little girl by her hand and said, Talitha Kumi, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astonished. Just like that, grabbed her hand, said, hey, get up, wake up. And she's back. In many of these miracles, we see some sort of aspect of touch, like a physical contact where he holds their hand or touches their eyes or something. Not all the time, but many times. And he gave them strict orders that no one was to know about this, and he told them to have something given her to eat. Poor girl. Chapter 6. Isn't this fun? And it's real. It's true stories of God himself, the actual Son of God on earth. It's fascinating. Okay, moving on. Chapter 6. Jesus went out from there and came into his hometown again, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and the many listeners were astonished, saying, where did this man learn these things? And what is this wisdom that has been given to him, and such miracles as this performed by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, Joseph, Judah, and Simon? And are his sisters not here with us? And they took offense at him. They're like, we know this guy, he shouldn't be this amazing, he was just a carpenter, and we know his family, and he's not that big of a deal. Why is he acting like a big of a deal? Jealousy, envy, disrespect. Yeah. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not dishonored except in his hometown and among his own relatives and in his own household. So that's something that should be encouraging to all of us if our families are not taking us seriously and we know we deserve better. Don't take it personally. That's what happens. They did that to Jesus, to God himself. It's insane, but yeah. So don't worry, it's not a representation of you, it's a representation of their own hearts. And he could not do any miracle there except that he laid hands on a few sick people and healed them. That's because they didn't believe. Yeah, Jesus can, but you're not going to receive it if you don't receive it, if you don't believe. And he was amazed at their unbelief, and he was going around the villages teaching. Make sure you're not blocking miracles from God because you operate out of fear. You can say no to fear and be like, I make a conscious choice to believe, even though it's scary. And you don't believe because you can, you believe because he can, because he can. He can, and he is willing. So you have everything you need for a miracle. Just choose to accept that. Be like, yeah, he can, he's willing. I ask, I receive. Amen. Thank you, Jesus. Moving on. And he summoned the 12 and began to send them out in pairs and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. And he instructed them that they were to take nothing for their journey except a mere staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belt, but to wear sandals. And he added, do not wear 2 tunics. And he said to them, wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave town. Don't hop from house to house. Stay in one. Any place that does not receive you or listen to you, as you go out from there, shake the dust off the soles of your feet as a testimony against them. Like, I want nothing to do with you, not even your dust. And they went out and preached that people are to repent. People don't like being corrected. A lot of people get really defensive when they are corrected, but they need to get over it and accept that and grow up. They were asked to repent. And they were casting out many demons and were anointing with oil many sick people and healing them. How great is that? People can do this to this day. We just don't do it. Most of us don't. And King Herod heard about it, for his name had become well known, and people were saying, as in Jesus' name. And people were saying, John the Baptist has risen from the dead, and that is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. They thought he was John the Baptist because they already killed John the Baptist, so now they thought Jesus was John the Baptist that came from the dead, and now he's doing amazing miracles, and they were scared. But others were saying he is Elijah, and others were saying he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. So they were acknowledging that he is kind of like a prophet, and he is doing amazing things that they have only seen in the past in other prophets doing, which were the people that were in the closest relationship with God and messengers between God and the people. So they were acknowledging that, and they were acknowledging some sort of like holiness within him, like he was living that kind of holy life. But the king wasn't happy because he had beef with John the Baptist. But when Herod heard about it, he kept saying, John, whom I beheaded, has risen. For Herod himself had sent men and had John arrested and bound in prison on account of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip, because he had married her. So he married his sister-in-law. Crazy. Gross. Wrong. For John had been saying to Herod, it is not lawful, for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias, the woman, held a grudge against him and wanted to put him to death, and could not do so. For Herod was afraid of John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he had been protecting him. And when he heard him, he was very perplexed, and yet he used to enjoy listening to him. So the king was like, this guy is weird, but I like what he says, even though it's kind of like weird, almost like conspiracy theories, but not really, because it kind of makes sense, and I'm fascinated by his teaching. He's a cool guy, but I'm in the wrong, and he's calling me out, and my woman doesn't like it, and now I'm stuck between two people I can't please because one is against the other. The book of Matthew talks about this too, but there it kind of mentioned that he was afraid of the crowds because the crowds thought John the Baptist was a prophet, and he didn't want some sort of riot going on. An opportune day came when Herod, on his birthday, probably drunk. Bad things happen when people are drunk. Not a good thing to be drunk. The Bible clearly tells us, if you want to drink, you drink, but don't get drunk, because bad things happen. When you're drunk, you do stupid things, you're not thinking clearly. Yeah, your inhibitions might be gone, and you might do something that on impulse or at a moment of anger, and then you regret it the next day. So he had a birthday party for himself, held a banquet for his nobles and military commanders and the leading people of Galilee, so all the cool people were in there. And when the daughter of Herodias herself came in and danced, she pleased Herod, so that must have been his niece, right? He must, because it doesn't say it's his daughter, so it's probably his brother's daughter with his woman. Creepy. So the daughter came in, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests, so they really liked her dance. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you want, and I will give it to you. And he swore to her, whatever you ask of me, I will give it to you, up to half of my kingdom. He probably was drunk when he said that to a little girl who just did a dance, because that was just such a nice dance. You want half of my kingdom, you can have it. He must have been drunk. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And she went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask for, mother? And she said, Mama knows best. No, she didn't say that, I'm joking. And she said, the head of John the Baptist. Crazy. Crazy. Immediately she came in a hurry to the king. Imagine this little girl running to the king like, I know what I want. Kill this innocent man. Immediately she came in a hurry to the king and asked, saying, you see, I'm sassy, sorry, but gotta put some passion into it if you want to learn anything. I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And although the king was very sorry, he's like, what have I done? He should have had some sort of guidelines and rules on his offer, some sort of contract. I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic, but still, oh my goodness, this was so stupid. No offense, but it was stupid. Immediately, so although the king was very sorry because of his oaths, so he actually made an oath. He promised in a way that he couldn't back out from what he said. And his dinner guests, they were there, so they all witnessed it. He couldn't back out, right? He couldn't pretend that he didn't say this to this little girl and that she's just lying, because she wasn't. He was unwilling to refuse her. He was trapped by his own stupidity. Immediately the king sent an executioner and commanded him to bring back his head, and he went and beheaded him in the prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. This is so sad. He was a good man. He didn't deserve that, John the Baptist. Terrible. There are terrible people out there who don't want to change themselves, and they would much rather commit a crime to hurt an innocent person than to face their own demons. It's so sad. Makes me upset. When his disciples heard about this, they came and carried away his body and laid it in a tomb, headless. The apostles gathered together with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a little while. For there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. And they went away in the boat to a secluded place by themselves. The people saw them going, and many recognized them and ran there together on foot from all the cities and got there ahead of them. Please envision these stories. Jesus goes away on a boat because they needed a minute, and these people have been overwhelmed, suffered, and they needed a minute. And people are like, no, you're not getting a minute because I need your minute more than you do. And they're like, you could see the boat going away, and you can see this huge crowd of people on the shore just running, sprinting to get ahead of them, to still catch them, to still be with them. And by boat, they made it there slower than these people ran to catch Jesus. That's fascinating. They must have been really fit too. When Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. They were lost. They needed him. And he began to teach them many things. And when it was already late, his disciples came up to him and said, this place is secluded, and it is already late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. So it was night, everyone was starved. Probably some of them didn't even have money with them to just go buy food. It wasn't like that. There were no McDonald's in there. I'm joking. But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give it to them to eat?" Like, do you approve this message? But he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go look." It's like, I have a better solution. And when they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. So of all these people, no one had food with them. They just sprinted to meet Jesus in the spur of the moment, impulsively, without any preparation. And I guess they didn't expect it's gonna go this long, and that they're gonna be so fascinated and captivated by this teaching to the point that they will never leave to head back home. They forgot that they even need to eat. Jesus had to think about the fact that they need to eat, or they were just gonna sit there until they pass out. And of all these people, they only had like 5 fishes, five pieces, 5 breads, 5 loaves of bread, 5 breads, and 2 fish. That's all they had among all these people. And he ordered them all to recline by groups on the green grass. Okay, so sit together down in groups, like school, like summer camp, or whatever. They reclined in groups of hundreds and fifties. These were a lot of people. Hundreds sitting down together to form one group. 50 people to sit down together to form one group. Not 5, not 10, 50 and 100 people per group. It's like a whole little village in there. A whole democracy, I'm joking. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves, and he gave them to the disciples again and again to set before them, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He prayed, blessed the food, then he broke it, kept breaking the food up, shared with everyone, and they all ate and were satisfied. All these people ate that food and were full. And they picked up 12 full baskets of the broken pieces of bread and of the fish. There were 5,000 men who ate the loaves, not counting women and children. Do the math. 5,000 men, plus women, plus children. There were probably at least 15,000 people there who ate and were filled up by 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. I mean, one man could eat all of that and not be full if he's really hungry. Imagine feeding 5,000 men and more. And on top of that, they had a bunch of leftovers. If you try to sit down and divide 5 pieces of bread and 2 fishes, you're not gonna get 12 full baskets of those pieces. And yet, those were leftovers. Because Jesus blessed the food and it multiplied. So you might feel like you have scarcity in your life, and somehow you're gonna make it. Because Jesus blesses it and multiplies it if you ask him and you have faith. It doesn't have to make sense to you, but the outcome will be good in the end, even if the situation is not easy. And immediately Jesus had his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he himself dismissed the crowd. So he sat there, he said, "Hey, you go ahead of me, I'll meet you there later. I'm just gonna say goodbye to the crowds." So the disciples, his students, got on the boat and left. And after saying goodbye to them, he left for the mountain to pray. Once again, he spends time alone praying to God, his own personal growth and relationship. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and yet he was Son of God, and he was God, and he still prayed to God. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea, and he intended to pass by them. Jesus, what? This is slightly traumatic to me. So he sends them ahead. He's like, okay, I see them struggling. Okay, I'm just gonna head that way, but I'm gonna pass by. And he was walking on the sea, on the water. He was just taking a stroll on the water. Yeah, who does that? He intended to pass by them. This is so dramatic. These guys are stuck in a storm, trying so hard to make the boat move. And Jesus is just like, oh, I'm just gonna walk on the water real quick. It's stormy, but I'm fine. And I'm gonna catch up with them and also pass them just by walking. But so this is way too entertaining. I wished I could have seen this. I wish there was like a movie that was like a recording of this live and I could just see this with my own eyes, because this is amazing. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought that he was a ghost, and they cried out, as in they screamed, yelling, oh my goodness, what is going on? They were freaked out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke with them before they got a heart attack. He spoke to them immediately and said to them, take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. It's like, yeah, another way to shock you today. As if I didn't shock you enough. It's just me walking on water in the middle of a storm. You're fine. Yeah, all good. Peace and harmony. They all saw it, so they could have verified with each other and be like, okay, I'm not crazy, you're not crazy, we're actually seeing a ghost and we're terrified. He's like, no, it's not a ghost, it's me. I'm just acting supernaturally, because that's what I do. Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly astonished, for they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. So who knows where their heads were at, where their feelings and thoughts were focused on, because they weren't quite impressed, didn't quite get the lesson when Jesus did all these amazing miracles. It didn't quite stick with them to start believing it, to make it second nature for themselves, that yeah, Jesus is the miracle worker. And now he gave them another lesson. When they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret and moored at the shore. When they got out of the boat, immediately the people recognized him and ran about that entire country and began carrying here and there on their pallets those who were sick, to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he entered villages or cities or countryside, they were laying the sick in the marketplaces and imploring him that they might just touch the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched it were being healed. Chapter 7. The Pharisees and some of the scribes gathered to him after they came from Jerusalem, so the capital and the religious capital of Israel, and saw that some of his disciples were eating their bread with unholy hands, that is, they were unwashed. They didn't wash their hands and they ate food. Oh my goodness, you are a bad, terrible person who did a terrible thing. I'm being sarcastic, but that's what they were thinking. For the Pharisees and all the other Jews do not eat unless they carefully wash their hands, thereby holding firmly to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they completely cleanse themselves, full shower, full bath. And there are many other things which they have received as traditions to firmly hold, such as washing of cups, pitchers, and copper pots. Being clean is not bad, but being hateful that somebody else is not as clean as you are, that's a different story. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk in accordance with the tradition of the elders, but eat their bread with unholy hands?" Judgment. But he said to them, "Rightly did Isaiah prophesy about you, hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me, and in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of man." Neglecting the commandment of God, you hold to the tradition of man. They respect that rule as if it were the law of God, but it's not. They need to tone it down. He was also saying to them, "You are experts at setting aside the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother,' and the one who speaks evil of father or mother is certainly to be put to death." That was their law back in the day. But you say, if a person says to his father or his mother, "Whatever I have that would help you is korban," that means it is given to God. Meaning, I could have helped you with some money, but I decided not to, so I'm just gonna donate it to my church instead. That's pretty much what they're saying, that they don't want to help their parents. They could have helped their parents, and they could have given money to the church too, and they could have done both at the same time. They just didn't want to be nice. You no longer allow him to do anything for his father or his mother, thereby invalidating the word of God by your tradition, which you have handed down, and you do many things such as that. So what he's saying is, as you might see in other religions too, if you look at things that churches do in various religions or traditions, sometimes there are rules and rituals created by people or priests or whatever people in power at some point in the history of that religion or denomination. They were not rules made by God, and they don't have to be done that way, and they're not necessary to occur. It doesn't make you an unholy person. It doesn't send you to hell. There are all kinds of rules like that that churches do to this day. And some people hold really strong opinions about those. But God never commanded us to do that. And we shouldn't impose those on people. And just because people came up with certain rules that we do, that we like to do maybe as a group of people, it doesn't mean it's the law of God. And it doesn't mean it has to happen that way. There are rules like that in a lot of churches. I'm not going to mention them, but pray to God to show you. After he called the crowd to him again, he began saying to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside the person which can defile him if it goes into him. But the things which come out of the person are what defile the person." So if you eat an apple and you didn't wash it, it might make you sick if it has something on it, but it's not going to make you unholy. It's not going to make you an evil person or sinful or send you to hell. The things you do, the things that are there in your heart, that's what condemns you in the end. If you're a bad person, it's in you, not in the apple. And when he later entered the house, away from the crowd, his disciples asked him about the parable, and he said to them, "Are you so lacking in understanding as well?" Scolded them. Jesus scolded quite a few people in his time here. "Do you not understand that whatever goes into the person from outside cannot defile him, as in make him dirty or sinful? Because it does not go into his heart, it's a matter of heart, but into his stomach and is eliminated in the toilet or whatever. Thereby he declared all foods clean." So it doesn't matter what you eat, it's not going to make you sinful. It's not going to send you to hell. So he's saying, if you ate pig, which you're not supposed to do in the old Torah, but if you ate pig, you're fine. You're not going to go to hell for it. That's what he's saying. It's your true nature, your true heart that determines if you're holy or not. And he was saying that which comes out of the person, that is what defiles the person. So their heart and what they say and how they act. For from within, out of the hearts of people, come the evil thoughts, acts of sexual immorality, thefts, murders, acts of adultery, deeds of greed, wickedness, deceit, indecent behavior, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the person. Okay. Now Jesus got up and went from there to the region of Tyre. And when he had entered the house, he wanted no one to know about it, and yet he could not escape notice. But after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately came and fell at his feet. Yeah. Now the woman was a Gentile. That means she was a foreigner. She was not a Jew. Of Syrophoenician descent. And she repeatedly, she insisted, asked him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he was saying, I guess on repeat to her, let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. So he's pretty much saying, I came here for the Jews, the Israelites, to do my missions for them and with them. I have no business with you. I'm not here for you. So I'm going to do miracles for them, but not for you. And just imagine being called a dog. She could have just, I guess he was testing his heart in a sense. I mean, he just talked about the heart being good or not. And now he's like saying this. And like if her heart was in the wrong place, now her ego would be triggered and she would fight about being called a dog by him instead of focusing on the kindness she's asking for her daughter. But she answered and said to him, wise woman, yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. Even dogs get some. And he said to her, because of this answer, go. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And after going back to her home, she found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Again, so she had faith. Like, I think the story was in Matthew as well. He was impressed with her faith. She had faith. She believed that he will help her. And she had the humility to receive that. Like, she knew her place. And she still got what she wanted. It didn't matter. That's what matters. She got what she needed. Praise God for that. But we can all learn from her. And he left the region of Tyre and came through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee within the region of Decapolis. And they brought to him one who was deaf and had difficulty speaking, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. And Jesus took him aside from the crowd by himself and put his fingers in his ears. And after spitting, he touched his tongue with the saliva. So he couldn't speak and he couldn't hear. So he put his fingers in his ear and he spit saliva on top of his tongue. Whoa. And looking up to heaven with a deep sigh, he said to him, Ephphatha. My goodness, this is very hard to pronounce. Ephphatha. That is, be opened. And his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was removed, and he began speaking plainly. So now he could hear and speak. He was perfectly fine. But this was a very interesting way to Very interesting process of healing from Jesus. There must have been something he knew about his situation when he did that healing. It wasn't just like, oh, let me hold your hand real quick. Oh, be healed. No, he put his fingers in his ears, spit saliva on his mouth, and then he said, be opened. And his ears were open, and the impediment of his tongue was removed, and he began speaking plainly. And he gave them orders not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them, the more widely they continued to proclaim it. Of course, they were excited. And they were utterly astonished, saying, he has done all things well. He makes even those who are deaf hear, and those who are unable to talk speak. It wasn't just like some curable disease that you're like, here's some medication and you'll be fine, or give it a week, it'll pass. This was not something they could cure, and they were very impressed by it because he didn't do any impossible experiments to heal him. He did just that. Chapter 8, and this is the last chapter in this video. In those days, when there was again a large crowd and they had nothing to eat, Jesus summoned his disciples and said to them, I feel compassion for the people because they have remained with me for 3 days already and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some of them have come from a great distance. And his disciples replied to him, where will anyone be able to find enough bread here in this desolate place to satisfy these people? And he was asking them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. So another incident where people are fed with almost nothing. And he directed the people to recline on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks and broke them and started giving them to his disciples to serve, and they served him to the people. So it's like a deja vu here. They also had a few small fish, and after he had blessed them, he told the disciples to serve this as well. And they ate and were satisfied, and they picked up 7 large baskets full of what was left over of the broken pieces. About 4,000 men were there, and he dismissed them. Obviously more than that, but they were counting men only. About 4,000 men were there. He fed all of them, all the people, with almost nothing yet again, with a lot of leftovers. And then when they were full, because he cares about those needs that we have, then he sent them home so they can go rest and be well and not pass out. He cared. Those needs mattered. And immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha. And the Pharisees came out and began to argue with him, demanding from him a sign from heaven to test him. Sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, why does this generation demand a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. And leaving them, he again embarked and went away to the other side. And the disciples had forgotten to take bread and did not have more than 1 loaf in the boat with them. And he was giving orders to them, saying, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet comprehend or understand? Do you still have your heart hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces you picked up? They said to him, 12. And when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of broken pieces did you pick up? And they said to him, 7. And he was saying to them, do you not yet understand? And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a man who was blind to Jesus and begged him to touch him. So he was talking about it. When he said the leaven or the bread of those other people, he was talking about their teachings, their ways. He wasn't talking about their bread. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a man who was blind to Jesus and begged him to touch him. Taking the man who was blind by the hand, he brought him out of the village, and after spitting in his eyes and laying his hands on him, spit again, he asked him, do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see people, for I see them like trees walking around. So he wasn't seeing quite well yet. Then again he laid his hands on his eyes, and he looked intently and was restored, and began to see everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." Jesus went out, along with his disciples, to the village of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he questioned his disciples, saying to them, "Who do people say that I am?" They told him, saying, "John the Baptist, and other people say Elijah, and others one of the prophets." And he continued questioning them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered and said to him, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God." And he warned them to tell no one about him. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise from the dead. And he was stating the matter plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, because he cared but didn't help the situation. He didn't know the purpose. But turning around and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's purposes but on man's." Obviously, he's not calling Peter Satan, but the idea is something Satan would give to him. And he summoned the crowd together with his disciples and said to them, "If anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it benefit a person to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what could a person give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Amen. So he is saying to have faith in God and receive the salvation and transformation that God provides is not an easy task. It will be hard, and people will give you a hard time, but you need to value this more than anything else or the opinions of people, because this is greater than all of that, and Jesus is greater than all of that.